Welcome to the Explainer. Huge congratulations, by the way. You just landed that Senior Database Administrator role. And well, you've got a pretty critical mission ahead of you right out of the gate. Your primary objective today is to completely lock down and secure the environment for the AdventureWorks LT database. You are literally the architect of this security perimeter. So this Explainer is going to serve as your exact blueprint before you jump into the hands-on lab. We're going to walk through the exact concepts and procedures you need to absolutely master to ensure your data stays safely out of the wrong hands. Let's get into it.
All right, let's look at today's mission briefing checklist for your upcoming lab. We'll start with the DBA security mission, move into provisioning your Azure environment, set up Entra ID authentication, manage your database authorization, rigorously test that access, and finally, handle the essential lab cleanup.
Okay, Section 1, the DBA security mission, securing the perimeter.
As a database expert, you absolutely have to nail this fundamental difference. It's basically the core of everything you'll be doing today. Think of authentication as the gatekeeper. It simply asks, who are you, and can you prove it? Authorization, on the other hand, well, that's the rule book. Once you're finally past the gate, it asks, what exactly are you allowed to do in here? In this lab, you're going to configure both of these. You'll use Microsoft Entra ID right at the front gate, and then internal T-SQL roles for the rulebook.
Moving right along to Section 2, provisioning the Azure environment, laying the foundation.
So in the lab, you're going to follow a few quick steps to get everything up and running. First, you'll open up Visual Studio Code and clone the official Microsoft Learning repository straight to your C drive into a folder called Lab Files. Once you have those files locally, you'll pop open the integrated terminal and just run the AZ login command to authenticate your Azure CLI. A browser window will pop up, you drop in your Azure credentials, and boom, you're connected. Finally, you'll execute the provided PowerShell script, which is deploy SQL Database.ps1 to actually build out your SQL Server.
What's actually really cool about this deployment script is how flexible it is. On one hand, you've got the automated defaults. If you just let it run its course, it'll look for or create a resource group called Contoso RG in the West US2 region, and it's going to automatically generate a highly secure, totally random 12-character password for your SQL admin. But, as a senior DBA, you probably want control, right? So you also have custom overrides. You can use parameters to specify your own resource group name, your preferred location, and your own admin password. Just keep in mind, if you do set your own password, it absolutely must meet strict Azure SQL complexity requirements. We're talking at least 12 characters, including uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters. The whole shebang. Plus, the script even adds your current public IP address to the SQL Server firewall automatically, so you can actually connect to it later without a headache.
Which brings us to Section 3, Microsoft Entra ID Authentication, building the gates.
All right, here in the portal interface is where the magic happens. You're going to navigate over to your newly created SQL Server in the Azure portal. Under the Overview blade, there's a spot that says Microsoft Entra Admin, which is initially going to say Not Configured. You just click that, hit Set Admin, and search for the very same Azure username you used to log into the portal. By selecting and saving this, you've just elevated your own identity to be the top-level gatekeeper for this entire SQL Server.
Now, the absolutely crucial point to remember here is what this actually means under the hood. The official documentation states that creating a contained database user means you are mapping a user directly to an identity in the Microsoft Entra directory. The beauty of this modern approach is that it completely bypasses the traditional master database login. It's cleaner, it's way more secure, and it tightly binds your database access right to your centralized enterprise directory.
Okay, Section 4, Managing Database Authorization, Setting the Rules.
Once you're securely connected to AdventureWorks LT using those new Entra ID credentials, you're definitely not just handing out blanket access to everyone. No way. Instead, you're going to meticulously execute a specific T-SQL workflow. First, you'll run some commands to create two local users, DP300User1 and DP300User2. Next, instead of assigning permissions to them individually, which, trust me, is a total nightmare to manage at scale, you're going to create a custom role called Sales Reader. You'll add both of your new users to this Sales Reader role. Finally, to give them something to actually do, you'll create a test stored procedure named stlt.demoproc, which calculates total sales.
Next up, Section 5, Testing Security Access, Proving the Defenses. So to test all of this, you'll use the super handy Execute as User command to temporarily impersonate DP300User1. In the initial state, when you try to run the new stored procedure as user 1, you're going to intentionally encounter a denial. It's going to throw an error.
and this perfectly sets up the need for your specific authorization fix. In the secure state, you'll grant the exact permissions needed so that the execution is actually successful. When you're actually looking at the workflow in SSMS, you're going to notice some red text. That is message 229, basically yelling at you that the execute permission was denied on the object demo proc. But hey, the system is working, the gate is closed. To open it just the right amount, you run the revert command to switch your context back to the database owner. Then you execute the fix, grant execute on schema sales LT to sales reader. By applying this to the sales reader role, DP300User1 and User2 suddenly have exactly the access they need, and absolutely nothing more. When you rerun the test, it's going to execute perfectly.
Finally, we hit Section 6, Essential Lab Cleanup, Tearing Down.
Once you've crushed the testing phase, you're going to follow a few simple steps to completely tear everything down. You'll pop back over into the Azure portal, navigate to Resource Groups, and find the one you created for this lab, most likely Contoso RG. You'll issue a delete command for the entire resource group, which cleanly wipes out the SQL Server and the database in one go. Then, don't forget about your local machine. Open up your File Explorer, navigate to the C drive, and delete that lab files folder you cloned from GitHub earlier. A good DBA always keeps their environment exactly as clean as they found it.
And there you go. You are now totally briefed on the concepts and the exact step-by-step procedures you need to execute. You've seen exactly how to build the gates with Entra ID and write the rulebook with precise T-SQL authorization. So, I'll leave you with this question. Knowing how incredibly easy it is to implement these granular controls, is your current real-world database truly as secure as you think it is? Well, it's time to find out. Grab your Azure credentials, fire up Visual Studio Code, and let's get hands-on.
Hello everyone. In this section of DP300 Database Administrator, we'll go through Lab 3, Authorize Access to Azure SQL Database with Microsoft Entra ID. So this is mainly to focusing or to ensure the security of the database environment. So make sure that you downloaded or get all the files that you needed. You can get that by going through this GitHub link. I'll share this GitHub link so that you can follow when you do into your own environment. So let me start that one. Here I have already connected to Azure portal, but let's go to my lab environment, like lab files. And here that labs folder. So I'll right click and select the options open in Windows Terminal. Just doing font little bigger. So now here, let me connect to Azure using CLI. So type AZ login. So it's open a window, a browser window to login. So select that, in my case, that is work or school account. Click continue. Then give the user ID and password for logging in. That can be password or token, temporary access pass. Click sign in. Select yes for now. So it's registering this device. Account added to this device. So then click on done. And retrieving all those uh, Azure portal information, subscription, tenant, and if that's all good, you can select enter. and to change that one you can change that one. Now here we are going to typing two commands. First one is change the directory, go the directory, and then execute the deploy SQL database statement and ps PowerShell command. Press enter. So you can see that it's created a secret password and get the public IP, and we can see the deployed result. So which is deployed result is giving us the resource group name, SQL server name, and password informations. So next we are going to do authorize access to Azure SQL database. So open that Microsoft Management Studio. Then in the SQL Server, you can see that server type is database engine. And in the server name, get the server name from the portal. Then Windows Authentication, select that Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentications. Then here we need to pass the username. And click connect. Authentication complete. We can return back to the applications. So let's go back here. So you can see that message. So it's giving that you are not signed into Microsoft Azure. A client IP address does not have this access to the server, then sign in there. I got a message that it succeeded, but it is asking me again, authentication complete. You can return to the application. Feel free close this browser. Let me close that one. Then it's getting that one. It's and did this IP address firewall rule. Click OK. So here I am like connected to that database. Here, click on new query. So now I'm going to create two user. So you can see that create user with password. Go is it will going to next one. Then to execute this one second user. So user 1 and user 2. So let me execute. So now if I go to this database and under security users, we can see that user 1 and user 2 users are created. Now to execute another query, we can open another SQL window, transact SQL window, and then type this command, or you can copy the command from the document. So this time we're going to create roles. So Now execute that one. To execute, just click and then click execute button. So commands completed successfully. So we have created roles, sales reader, and then give those roles to that users. So if I go to that users, next we are going to create procedure. Click execute. So it created procedures. Then we are going to use execute as user syntax to test out the security. So execute as that user and execute this sales on table and demo procedure. So now if we execute this one, you can see that we are getting a error message that it's showing execute permission was denied on the object. Database is this one and schema is that one. That means this users does not have permissions this component or object that I said that is actually the procedure that we created before. Now to grant permissions, we can do, let me grant that one. So we are giving execute permissions that to that role, and that role is granted to that users. So we are giving this object's permission to that role, and which role actually assigned to that user. So let me first execute this command. So command completed successfully. Now if I try to execute this one, this time you can see that we can see the values for this one. So that's it for this lab. It's always recommended practice that you just go through and delete that resource group, which I have already shown into previous two labs, so you can follow that one. If you have any questions, add that into comment sections. Otherwise, see you into next lab. Please